Alright guys, this is another BronyDan Talks Doctor Who. I know it's quite sudden, especially since we've only just done the King's Demons, but I suddenly just remembered that today, of course, is Doctor Who's 56th anniversary, and I just thought, being a Doctor Who fan, I have to find some way to celebrate it. So I just thought, why don't I take a look at another Doctor Who story, specifically a anniversary story. And what better story to talk about than the one that started it all? The Three Doctors, the 10th anniversary special from, well, it was the opening story to season 10, which actually didn't air until the very end of 1972, so it didn't actually air on the 10th anniversary of the show, but it counts as the anniversary special, so that's what we're looking at today. So in the Three Doctors, the Time Lords are in a bit of a crisis. There is an energy drain that's pretty much draining away all of their energy, and it's coming from a black hole which leads into a universe of antimatter, and basically it's draining away all their energy, all their power, and if they lose all this power, then they are pretty much defenseless and they become quite weakened by it. And so, being the Time Lords of the 70s, they can't deal with it themselves, so they have the Doctor to sort it out for them. But with a crisis this big, they realise that one Doctor isn't going to be enough, so they pretty much send his first two incarnations to help out the third, and thus it's a whole multi-Doctor story. We learn a little bit more about Time Lord mythology, and I honestly think that the Three Doctors, I always kind of juggle between which story I like more out of the anniversary stories, whether it's this or the Five Doctors, because, like, I think Three Doctors, has a much more interesting story, and it's a more world-building story, whereas on the other hand, I like the Five Doctors because it is a pretty good crowd pleaser. It has all the things you want from an anniversary special, and it's all fan-pleasing to fans. But at the same time, Three Doctors, I think, does that as well, especially because of the fact that we've got William Hartnell and Patrick Troughton back, and I think we all can agree that just seeing them is enough. I think the best thing about this whole story is what everyone says what they like about the Three Doctors, and that is the banter between the second and third Doctors. Patrick Troughton and John Pertwee just go like that. They are constantly butting heads throughout the entire story, which is funny because that's kind of how it was when they were making the show. You got both of them had such big egos on how they'd play the Doctor and how they worked on the show that it did clash during production, and they were arguments between the pair of them, and it did transfer into the actual show itself, and it's such a joy just watching them pick each other apart. And of course, obviously by the end of the story, you know, both Pat and John did become quite good friends at the end of it, and the arguing between the pair of them kind of became their thing, where, like, whenever they'd go to, like, conventions or they would appear together in interviews on television, people would be expecting them to just start arguing, and they would. It is admittedly a bit of a shame that we got so little of dear old William Hartnell in this story, because obviously, you know, all we ever get of Bill in this story are like the pre-filmed inserts he did before production, and he only appears occasionally on the TARDIS monitor. But I can understand why they had to do this, because obviously by this point William Hartnell was, you know, he was incredibly ill, and, you know, if you look at, like, the behind the scenes photographs that the three actors did together, you could tell that Bill, he just looks terrible. He was pretty much at death's door at this point. But I have to give him credit for at least being able to get up, come to the studio, get into costume, put on his wig, makeup, and, you know, deliver what I have to say is a very good performance, even if it is limited, and because of his, you know, because of his arteriosclerosis and, you know, his memory loss and everything, he is basic, and the fact that, you know, despite the fact that he is reading his lines off cue cards behind the camera, he still gives a performance that you just say, that is the First Doctor. The First Doctor is back. And considering that this is also Bill's last role, like this was the last piece of acting he ever did before he died, it just feels nice just to see him again, and the fact that, you know, this, you know, and the fact that he did come back for the role that, you know, he made famous, I just think it just warms you up, especially when you consider how much he was suffering at this point. So the big baddie for this whole story is, of course, Omega, played by the late Stephen Thorne, who of course had played Azal in The Demons in season 8. And, you know, if you don't know Omega, he is like one of the big founders of Time Lord Society. He was the one who developed time travel for Time Lords, except, of course, he ends up getting trapped in the black hole of antimatter, and so he is pretty much draining all the Time Lord energy as sort of vengeance so that he can escape. And, you know, I've always liked Omega. He's, like, people say that, you know, he is a typical, you know, he's a big, booming, shouty villain, basically. I mean, like, whenever you think of Omega, you think of his classic line of, "A hero! I should have been a god!" That kind of, like, it's that kind of performance that he gives. But I also think that people forget that he does have some probably legit funny moments. Not sure if it was intentional or not, but there are moments from his performance which do get a chuckle out of me. I think the best one is when the second Doctor is giving his usual trick of making it seem like he's, you know, not taking anything seriously, and he is a bit, you know, foolish, and, you know, playing it up as an incompetent idiot, and Omega just sort of looks at him for a second, then turns to the third Doctor and just says, "Are you sure that you and he are the same intelligence?" It's like even he can't work out, how did you go from this to that to you? Where did this happen? It's like one of those subtle bits of dialogue that just make Omega such a fascinating villain. And he is quite a fascinating villain because, you know, the Doctor describes him as being quite a confused villain because like his motive, like his reason for wanting to do everything keeps flip-flopping. And when you get to the end of the story, you realise he's quite a sympathetic villain. You do feel sorry for him. There are like other moments as well that I think are funny. I mean, like, you can't ignore the gel guards. You know, they're hilarious in themselves. Like, I mean, like, I can remember when I first saw the Three Doctors, and when I was quite young, I can remember watching the story, and I thought, I don't know why, I just thought they looked like melted Yeti. Because obviously and obviously they're not, and the noises they make, you know, they're when they're talking, it's like they can also be kind of like they're trying to be a threat, but at the same time they just sort of bob up and down as they're walking, and that noise is just hilarious. Yes, I think as well they also do an even sillier noise from them later on when, like, one of them contacts Omega, and it's like, it sounds like a hamster talking to Omega. It's this continuous squeaking sound, and it's like, do they have their own forms of communication? And how does Omega understand what they're saying? I mean, I guess because he created the gel guard from his mind and his will, then I guess he must have some understanding of what they're saying. So, overall, yeah, Three Doctors I think it's a fun story. It's full of like little bits of, it's full of like a lot of world like development. You know, we learn a little bit more about, like I said, we learn a little bit more about Time Lord society, and of course, you know, the fact that we've got the first three Doctors in the same story together just makes it all the more enjoyable to watch. Like I said, even though Billy Hartnell's role is quite limited to what he has to do, but at the same time, I love the Three Doctors, and it's like, again, if you haven't seen the Three Doctors, I highly recommend it, especially for today when it's, you know, it's a big day for Doctor Who. It's an anniversary story, so this feels like the right time to actually sit down and appreciate how Doctor Who celebrated these occasions. So, yeah, I love the Three Doctors. Really good story. If you've got any other Doctor Who stories you want me to review, whether good or bad, you can comment them down below. And, yeah, I'll see you next time.